I am a huge fan of the Old Testament, so why do I feel like studying it this year in the Come Follow Me has fallen so flat? It's been bothering me all year, and I've had a really hard time explaining why. I feel like it is too shallow in its presentation of the gospel, but when I say that, people think I'm talking about quote-unquote deep doctrine. And I'm not convinced that deep doctrine is a meaningful category, but if you're talking about things like whether or not Adam had a belly button or how time works on Kolob, I agree that there's maybe better uses of our time. Anyway, I finally figured it out, so I'm going to tell you. Rather than being too shallow, Come Follow Me is too narrow. It hits a small subset of topics over and over again, while entirely ignoring the domain knowledge contained in the Old Testament, the little nuggets of wisdom about all kinds of circumstances and situations that have been preserved for us. And the more I thought about it, I realized that the church is the same way. It confines itself to a very narrow set of teachings and questions, and I actually think the thin faith that results from this is why we've lost our mojo recently on several important topics. So let me explain, by way of example. The other month, I was asked to substitute teach in a youth Sunday school class one Sunday, which couldn't possibly go wrong. The topic that week was the Book of Judges, and Come Follow Me's take was underwhelming, to say the least. It focuses almost entirely on the personal relationship that you can have with Jesus in your ordinary life, which is not what the Book of Judges is about. These are not bad ideas in a vacuum, but this isn't really learning. At best, this is regurgitation of something that you already learned elsewhere. I mean, if you want to read a book about repentance and then inspiring others to faith, you can read about Alma the Younger in the Book of Mormon, because that's what that story is actually about, and it's great. But the Book of Judges is about something different that the Come Follow Me doesn't really seem like it wants you to learn. Judges is about what to do if you find yourself a righteous man in a wicked nation. It's about how a nation, and not just the individuals inside it, can be righteous or wicked to begin with. Judges is about what happens when God calls you to tear down an idol, and it's about what's expected of you when God calls your son to tear down an idol, and it's your idol. The book also contains various other tidbits on topics like power, succession, and dating. And what matters here is not so much what Judges specifically has to say about these things. What matters is that the Old Testament really has a lot to say about a wide range of subjects. And unfortunately, our study of it is ignoring probably 95% of this wisdom. This has a couple of problems. Problem number one is that all that stuff you're missing still applies to you. God is still going to call you to tear down idols, you certainly have to answer the woman question, and obesity is still bad for you. And as for the rest of that Book of Judges stuff, I'll let Captain Barbosa here do the talking. Anyway, reading about the people in the Old Testament, the circumstances they faced, the choices they made, the consequences that followed, and how God helped them through their trials, gives you this mental toolbox when you face similar situations for yourself. This is why we study history in the first place. The second problem, in my opinion, is worse. Ideas do not exist in a vacuum. Now, you guys might have seen this before. If you haven't, maybe that means you haven't lost money recently. This is an S&P 500 heat map. Each square represents a different stock. The green squares are stocks that have gone up, while the red squares are stocks that have gone down. One could imagine a version of this, except instead of representing stocks, it represents the thoughts in your own head. You could have green thoughts which come from Christ or the gospel, or you could have red thoughts which come from Satan or from the world. But remember, ideas don't exist in a vacuum. So even if you've got the right faith and testimony and understanding when it comes to Jesus, what happens if you fundamentally misunderstand his most important teachings? Can you love your neighbor if you don't know what love is? Can you be a peacemaker if you don't know how to make peace? Can you really say Jesus is Lord if you don't know how to have a Lord? And if you can't do any of those things, then do you really have a testimony of Jesus? The problem with the narrow focus of Come Follow Me is that it leaves too much gray and red areas on the map. It teaches green about a few narrow religious points but doesn't contest all the red around them. But of course there's no such thing as neutral, which means these uncontested ideas are just filled in by the world. And once that happens, I'm not surprised that we're struggling on retention, we're struggling on family formation, and we're struggling on building Zion these days. For the problem of retention, when you look at it from the world's perspective, much of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' teachings, history, and policies are straight up immoral. And if you're running around with 2/3 of your head filled with the world's perspective all the time, that's a hard contradiction to maintain, which is why I beat this particular drum all the time. As far as family goes, it doesn't exist in a vacuum either. But if you are worldly about all the things that go into making a marriage work, then the fact that you got married in the temple isn't going to save you from getting a divorce or from waking up one day and realizing you're never going to have grandchildren. On Zion, how can you build it if you consider it borderline immoral to even have standards about how your community ought to be, much less seek and wield power in order to make those standards a reality? So, all in all, this is pretty bad. But it's worth asking why this is happening, especially when the answer is something as simple as studying the contents of the books you're reading when you read them. But it turns out the answer is another bit of overlooked domain knowledge, this time from the book of Ezra. How to do your religion when you are not sovereign. Much of the book of Ezra revolves around the efforts of the Jews to build a new temple in Jerusalem after returning from the exile, while the Samaritans try and prevent the project from getting off the ground. Since neither side is actually in charge, they both go and appeal to the king. Now, the thing to understand about the king is that he doesn't care about this project nearly as much as either of these guys do. So pay attention to how they present their arguments. The Jews remind him that a prior king had supported this temple project, therefore presenting it as business as usual, as following the rules, as doing what they're supposed to. The Samaritans, for their part, cast the project as against the rules and dangerous. The Jews as a rebellious people who shouldn't be allowed to build up their city again. All that's to say, of all the temple building stories in Scripture, from Kings to 2nd Nephi to the Doctrine and Covenants, this is the only one that matches the circumstances in which temples are built now. In fact, it almost perfectly mirrors the controversy we've had recently about the Fairview temple. And yes, I promise this still has something to do with Come Follow Me. Just bear with me here, alright? Anyway, in this Fairview dispute, again, neither us nor the town of Fairview are sovereign, so we both went to appeal to the king. Only this time we don't actually have a king. And it would be wrong also to think of the mayor of Fairview as the sovereign here. He's not. If he were, he'd be able to just kill the project and move on. The sovereign, instead, is the system, made partly out of rules and partly out of people who interpret the rules. And these rules are what both sides appealed to. Again, pay attention to how we make our case. The Church's case is that building temples is part of our religion, and that the legal history of the First Amendment in America is that religious groups have broad latitude to build their churches however they see fit. Thus, we presented the temple case as a continuance of tradition, as entirely legal and really as no big deal from the sovereign's perspective. Meanwhile, the town presented the temple as too big, too bright, disruptive to their community, dangerous, and out of line. As opposed to being no big deal, this thing is bucking the rules and ought not be allowed to happen. It's the same set of arguments from Ezra, just transposed into the modern world. And what happened in the case of this dispute was a compromise. We hit the temple with the shrink ray and turned it from 2 stories to 1 story, which unfortunately resulted in a temple that is just not as cool. And that's what I've been driving at this whole time. I'm religiously obligated to say that the temple on the right is just as good as the temple on the left for the performance of ordinances, though the 1-story design is probably too small for the needs of the membership in the area, but that's neither here nor there. What is here is that something intangible has been lost. It's hard to quantify, but the building on the left is far more credible as a house of the Lord at being what we say a temple is and ought to be compared to the building on the right. It creates this subtle integrity issue, this gap between the church's words and the church's actions. This temple is appeasing the sovereign first and a house of the Lord only second. But the things that we say about temples, that they're the most important buildings on the earth, that they're these great beacons of spiritual power, that they're literally God's house, they shouldn't be anything second. And to wrap this all back together, the Come Follow Me represents the same compromise. It is appeasing the sovereign first and gospel learning only second. In this case, the sovereign is a system made largely out of ideas, which means the church has to be very careful teaching or even drawing attention to any ideas that contradict the system. We can't let it be known that being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints carries with it the expectation that a different set of ideas than this one ought to rule. The church being forced to walk on eggshells around the system prevents it from teaching the restored gospel of Jesus Christ as a unified, broad-spectrum set of ideas and answers to all the various questions. It means the gospel as taught through the Come Follow Me can't contest the various gray and red flavored ideas in the head of an ordinary person, even as those errors run out of control and erode their faith out from underneath them. So I'm not surprised that we've lost our mojo recently. But enough complaining about problems. Just because things are going bad for most people doesn't mean they have to go bad for you. There's no reason why you can't have green ideas in the right places at the right times and then start building a positive feedback loop from there that brings you closer and closer to God. So figuring out how to do all that will be the subject of this channel for the time being. Next time I'll be launching into my series on marriage with a deep dive into the thought map that makes it work or not. This series will be a comprehensive attempt to help young people who are having trouble finding or keeping their temple marriage. So if that describes you, be sure you're subscribed. And as for Zion, if you want to come hang out, I'll be building Zion on August 29th at 10 a.m. in Salt Lake City, cleaning up Memory Grove Park, tearing down the idols of the worshippers of entropy who run the place right now. It'll be fun. I mean, what did you guys think that restorationism meant? Vibes? Essays? It's both of those things, but it's also actual factual restoring of what other people have neglected. Link in the show notes. And in the meantime, if you want to catch another video about some of these bad ideas that have crept into the brains of even faithful Latter-day Saints, you can check out this video popping up on screen right now. I guarantee that most of you haven't seen it because it got way less views than it deserved. So check it out. That's it from me for this week. Thanks for watching.